Commander Zethkar stood before the young cadets in the dimly lit Academy Hall. His battle-scarred face carried the weight of 15 years since the war ended. The silence was thick as he began to speak. "You want to know about the human war," he said, his voice rough from old wounds. "You think you understand what happened out there. You do not." The cadets leaned forward in their seats. They had heard stories, seen the reports, but never from someone who lived through it. Zethkar's 3 eyes swept across the room, seeing their eager faces. "When the High Command first showed us images of Earth, we laughed," he continued. "Small, blue planet, weak creatures walking on 2 legs. They had no energy shields, no plasma weapons. They shot metal bullets from crude guns. We thought it would be easy." He paused, remembering that first briefing room. General Vorth had displayed the human ships on the main screen. Primitive vessels held together with metal bolts and chemical fuel. The Zephyrian fleet possessed energy barriers and quantum drives. Victory seemed certain. Our first meeting with humans happened at Kepler 442. 3 of our scout ships were patrolling the system when we found them. 1 human vessel, the USS Defiance. Captain Jake Martinez commanded it with maybe 40 crew members. We had 600 soldiers across our 3 ships. Zethkar walked slowly between the rows of cadets. His mechanical leg clicked with each step, a reminder of what the humans had done to him. We sent the standard surrender demand. All species had accepted it before. The humans sent back a message, just 2 words. "Come and take it." We thought they were being foolish. The old commander stopped at the front of the room. He could still see that battle in his mind, clear as yesterday. Commander Zelf ordered the attack. Our ships moved in formation, energy shields at full power. The human ship turned toward us, not away. Toward us, it was coming straight at our flagship. The cadets sat in complete silence now. Some of them had never heard this story before. The humans opened fire first. Their metal bullets bounced off our shields like rain. We fired back with plasma cannons. Their ship took hit after hit. Hull plates flew off. Atmosphere leaked out. Any normal species would have surrendered. Zethkar's voice grew quieter, more intense. But the humans did something impossible. They shut down their life support systems. They shut down their weapons. They shut down everything except their engines. Every bit of power went to making that ship move faster. He turned to face the cadets directly. Captain Martinez was on there. Communication channel. He was not screaming or begging. He was talking to his crew like they were planning a dinner party. Instructions. Calm orders. Then he looked right at our camera and smiled. The memory still made Zethkar's skin crawl. The Defiance hit our flagship at full speed. The impact killed Commander Zelf and 3,000 soldiers instantly. The explosion took out one of our other ships. But that was not the worst part. He limped to the window, looking out at the stars. The worst part was what we found in the wreckage. Human bodies floating in space, but some of them were still alive, still conscious. They had put on emergency suits and were using their last oxygen to study our ship parts. The cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We captured 12 survivors, including Martinez. They had been in vacuum for 6 minutes, half dead from radiation and cold. But when we brought them aboard, they were not afraid. They were looking at everything, memorizing our technology, taking notes in their heads. Zethkar remembered the interrogation room. The humans had sat calmly while Zephyrian officers screamed questions at them. Martinez told us something I will never forget. He said humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. Every type of war possible. In space, on land, underwater, in the air. They had learned to fight in conditions that would kill. Most species. The commander moved back to the center of the room. We thought we were fighting soldiers. We found out we were fighting an entire species that had been preparing for war since they first picked up rocks to throw at each other. He pulled up a holographic display showing the battle statistics. The humans lost 1 ship and 43 crew members. We lost 2 ships and 4,000 soldiers. They were outnumbered 100 to 1, but they had made us pay a price we never expected. The cadets stared at the numbers in disbelief. Lieutenant Amy Foster was Martinez's second officer. She had been sucked into space during the collision. When we found her, she was using pieces of our ship hull as tools. She was trying to build a transmitter to warn other human ships about our weaknesses. Zethkar's voice grew darker. The humans we captured never broke under questioning. They never revealed military secrets, but they learned everything about us. How we thought, how we fought, how we feared. He walked to the back of the room, his mechanical leg clicking steadily. After 3 days, we received a message from the human fleet. They wanted to exchange prisoners. We agreed because we thought 12 humans were not worth much. We were wrong. The old commander stopped behind the last row of cadets. When the exchange happened, Martinez and his crew walked back to their ship like they were returning from vacation. No anger, no hatred, just cold calculation. They had learned what they needed to know. He returned to the front of the room, facing the young officers. 2 weeks later, human ships attacked our supply depot at Vega Prime. They used the exact same tactics we had used against them. They knew where our shields were weakest. They knew how our commanders would react. They had studied us like laboratory animals. The silence in the room was complete now. That was when we realized the truth. The humans had not been trying to win that first battle. They had been trying to learn. Every ship they lost, every soldier that died, it was all information. Data they could use to kill us better next time. Zethkar looked each cadet in the eye. The briefing had been wrong about everything. Humans were not weak. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and we had just taught them how to kill us. Commander Zethkar moved to the tactical display in the center of the room. The holographic image showed a green and blue planet hanging in space. New Haven, the human colony world where everything changed. 3 months after Kepler 442, High Command ordered the invasion of New Haven, he began, his voice steady, but his hands shaking slightly. 50,000 human colonists. Farmers, miners, families with children. We brought 200,000 soldiers. The cadets watched as the display zoomed in on the planet's surface. Rolling hills, small towns, agricultural fields. It looked peaceful. General Korax commanded the invasion force. He was confident. The humans had no military bases, no orbital defenses, no heavy weapons. Just civilian settlements scattered across 2 continents. Zethkar touched the display, and red markers appeared across the planet. The landing began at dawn. Our dropships came down in 12 locations simultaneously. The plan was simple. Surround each settlement, demand surrender, process the civilians for relocation. Clean and quick. He paused, remembering the reports that had started coming in within the first hour. Landing Zone Alpha was the first to report problems. The humans had evacuated their towns during the night. Every building was empty. But they had left things behind. Food on tables, clothes in closets. Like they had just stepped out for a moment. The old commander's expression grew grim. Major Thek led the search teams through the abandoned settlement. That was when they found the first body. A human. Child, maybe 10 years old, lying in the town square. Dead from plasma burns. The soldiers felt bad about it until they got closer. Zethkar manipulated the display to show a detailed view of a small town. The child was not dead. She was wearing some kind of drug, that made her body cold and still. When Major Thek bent down to examine her, she opened her eyes and triggered the explosives hidden in her clothes. Several cadets gasped. This was not the kind of warfare they had studied in textbooks. The blast killed 8 soldiers and wounded 15 more. But that was just the beginning. Every dead human they found was a trap. Every abandoned building was rigged with explosives. Every road leading out of town was mined. The commander walked around the display, pointing to different locations. Colonel Ryan Webb was coordinating the human defense from somewhere we could not find. He was using their civilian communication networks to stay in contact with resistance groups across the planet. Every farmer, every shopkeeper, every teacher had become a soldier. The display showed communication signals crisscrossing the planet, like a spider web. The humans had spent months preparing for this invasion. They had studied our tactics from the Kepler 442 battle reports. They knew exactly how we would attack and where we would land. Zethkar's voice grew harder. Within 6 hours, they had captured enough of our equipment to outfit their own soldiers. A 12-year-old boy named Danny Cooper had figured out how to use our plasma rifles. He was teaching other children how to strip them down and rebuild them. The cadets stared at the display in disbelief. The humans turned their entire planet into a weapon. They poisoned the water sources that our sensors said were safe to drink. They released modified bacteria that ate through our equipment seals. They used their own industrial facilities to manufacture explosives. Zethkar highlighted several locations on the map. Dr. Paul Henderson was an agricultural scientist before the war. He developed a chemical compound using fertilizer and household cleaning products. It dissolved our body armor in seconds. The humans were making it in every basement and garage. The commander moved to a different section of the display. But the worst part was what they did with our wounded. Sergeant Lisa Hayes led a team of humans who had learned to fake death so perfectly that our medical scanners could not detect the difference. They would lie among the real bodies until our medics came to help our injured soldiers. The room was completely silent now. When our medical teams arrived, Hayes and her people would activate hidden explosives. They killed hundreds of our best medics and destroyed our field hospitals. They turned mercy into a weapon. Zethkar's mechanical leg clicked as he shifted his weight. The humans learned our radio frequencies and communication protocols within days. They started sending false orders to our units. Entire companies would march into ambush because they thought they were following commands from their officers. He showed a recording on the display, a human voice speaking perfect Zephyrian military code. This is Major Janet Stone. She was a schoolteacher before the war. She had learned our language from captured equipment manuals. She spent weeks studying our command structure until she could imitate our officers perfectly. The voice on the recording gave detailed military orders in flawless Zephyrian tactical language. Stone would call our units and order them to new positions, always somewhere the humans were waiting. She killed more of our soldiers than any human weapons platform. Zethkar turned off the recording. The siege lasted 8 months. We could not tell who was a combatant and who was a civilian. Every human was a potential threat. Children carried bombs. Elderly people were spotters for artillery. Medical personnel were assassins. The display showed casualty reports scrolling past in red numbers. The humans used psychological warfare like nothing we had ever seen. They would leave recordings of our soldiers calling for help. When rescue teams arrived, they would find empty buildings and more traps. The commander highlighted a specific location on the map. Captain Ben Clark led a unit of humans who specialized in infiltration. They would sneak into our camps at night, not to kill, but to take things, 1 boot from each soldier, 1 energy cell from each weapon, 1 piece of food from each meal. He paused to let the cadets understand. They never harmed anyone during these raids, but our soldiers started going crazy. They never felt safe. They never knew when the humans were watching. Bem, Clark was making our entire army paranoid and afraid. Sethkar moved back to the center of the room. The humans had turned warfare into a science. They studied our behavior, our weaknesses, our fears. They knew we would retreat if casualties reached 15%. They knew we would panic if our supply lines were cut. They knew exactly how to break us. The display showed the final phase of the siege. The end came when Colonel Webb broadcast a message to our fleet. He did not threaten us. He did not demand our surrender. He simply told, "Use the facts." The old commander's voice grew quiet. Every human settlement had been rigged with nuclear explosives. Every human on the planet carried enough poison to contaminate the water supply for years. Every human child had been trained to fight to the death. He looked at each cadet in turn. Webb explained that conquering New Haven would require killing every human on the planet. But even if we succeeded, the planet would be uninhabitable for centuries. We would gain nothing but a radioactive wasteland. The display went dark. We withdrew from New Haven after losing 60,000 soldiers. The humans had lost maybe 5,000, but they had taught us something more important than tactics or technology. Sethkar faced the cadets directly. They had shown us that humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to make the cost of victory too high to pay. They turn everything into a weapon, including their own deaths. Commander Sethkar activated another holographic display. This one showed the orange and brown surface of Titan, Jupiter's largest moon. The cadets could see the massive industrial complex that had once been humanity's most important mining station. After New Haven, High Command thought they understood the human problem. Sethkar began, his voice carrying a bitter edge. They decided to attack a military target instead of civilians. Titan Base was perfect. 5,000 human soldiers. No families, no children, just professional fighters. The display zoomed in on the sprawling base complex. Refineries, storage, tanks, landing pads, and defensive positions covered hundreds of square kilometers. Admiral Korth commanded the siege force. 30,000 of our best soldiers, heavy artillery, orbital bombardment platforms. The humans had nowhere to run on that frozen moon. Sethkar pointed to the tactical readouts surrounding the base. Commander Kate Sullivan led the human defense. She was a mining engineer before the war, but she had learned military strategy from studying our previous battles. The humans always learned from us. The old commander manipulated the display to show the first phase of the siege. We started with standard siege tactics: surround the base, cut off supply lines, demand surrender. The humans responded by blowing up their own landing pads and communication arrays. They trapped themselves on purpose. Several cadets looked confused. This made no tactical sense. Admiral Korth was pleased. He thought the humans had panicked and made a mistake. He ordered a ground assault to begin immediately. That was when we learned about Titan's atmosphere. The display showed the moon's composition readings: methane, nitrogen, and other gases that most species could not breathe. Titan's air is poisonous to us. Our soldiers needed environmental suits and breathing apparatus. But humans had been living there for years. They had adapted to the conditions. The cold that slowed our reflexes made them move faster. Sethkar's expression grew darker. The humans had spent months preparing that moon for war. They had turned the entire industrial complex into a weapon. The methane processing plants became explosive factories. The mining equipment became artillery. The storage tanks became chemical weapons. The display showed a detailed breakdown of the base's defensive systems. Sullivan had divided her forces into small teams. Each team knew the base layout perfectly. They moved through maintenance tunnels and service corridors that our maps did not show. They could appear anywhere, strike fast, and disappear before we could respond. He highlighted several locations where battles had taken place. Major Scott Turner led the night operations. His teams would infiltrate our camps after dark. They never killed anyone. Instead, they would take one small item from each soldier: a boot, a weapon part, a food ration, one piece of equipment that would not be missed until later. The cadets leaned forward, trying to understand the strategy. Turner was not trying to cripple our forces. He was trying to break our minds. Our soldiers started checking their equipment every hour. They could not sleep. They could not focus on fighting. They were always worried about what the humans might take next. Zethkar walked around the display, his mechanical leg clicking steadily. The psychological impact was worse than any direct attack. Our soldiers became paranoid. They started suspecting each other. Unit cohesion broke down. Officers could not trust their own men to follow orders. The commander showed casualty reports from the siege. After 2 months, we had lost more soldiers to accidents and friendly fire than to human weapons. Turner had made our entire army afraid of the dark, afraid of silence, afraid of each other. He switched to a different section of the display. But the real horror was what the humans did to our prisoners. Captain Ben Clark ran their interrogation operations. He was not cruel or violent. He was scientific. The display showed medical equipment and research facilities. Clark had been a biology student before the war. He studied our physiology like we were laboratory animals. He learned exactly how our bodies worked, what made us sick, what caused us pain. Zethkar's voice grew quieter, more disturbing. The humans were not torturing prisoners for information. They were conducting experiments to find better ways to kill us. They tested our reaction times, our pain tolerance, our breaking points. They learned how to make weapons specifically designed to hurt our species. Several cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Clark shared his research with every human unit on Titan. Within weeks, they were using customized weapons and tactics based on our biological weaknesses. They knew exactly where to shoot to cause maximum damage. They knew which chemicals would disable our equipment. The display showed the siege's progression over 8 months. The humans turned Titan into a laboratory for studying warfare. Every battle was an experiment. Every casualty was a data point. They were learning to kill us more efficiently with each engagement. Zethkar highlighted the final phase of the siege. By month 6, Admiral Korith was requesting reinforcements. By month 7, he was requesting permission to withdraw. By month 8, he was begging High Command to authorize chemical weapons. The commander's voice carried the weight of bitter memory. The humans had reduced our elite siege force to a collection of terrified, paranoid soldiers who jumped at shadows. Turner's psychological operations had been more effective than any conventional weapon. He showed the final battle statistics. Sullivan broadcast a message to our fleet on the last day of the siege. She did not gloat or threaten. She simply stated facts. The humans had wired the entire moon with explosives. They had enough methane stored to create an explosion visible from Jupiter. The display showed the massive industrial complex in cross-section, revealing the extensive network of charges and fuel lines. She explained that the humans could trigger a controlled explosion that would destroy both forces completely. But they had calculated the exact yield needed to cripple our remaining ships in orbit without damaging Jupiter's other moons. Zethkar paused to let the implications sink in. The humans were offering us a choice: withdraw and love, or stay and die together. But they made it clear that they had already decided to destroy the base, regardless of our decision. The display showed the final moments of the siege. Admiral Korth ordered the withdrawal. As our ships pulled back, Sullivan's final transmission came through the communications array. Just 4 words. Remember what you learned. The commander turned off the display and faced the cadets directly. The explosion was visible from Earth. The humans had destroyed their own base, killed their own soldiers, and eliminated 8 months of fortifications. They had chosen mutual destruction over defeat. He walked to the front of the room, but they had accomplished their real objective. They had shown us that humans do not fight to hold territory. They fight to teach lessons. Every engagement was a classroom where they learned to kill us better. Zethkar's mechanical leg clicked as he shifted his weight. Sullivan and her garrison died in that explosion. But the data they collected during the siege was transmitted to every human military unit in the galaxy. They had turned their own deaths into a weapon against us. The silence in the room was complete. Titan Base taught us that humans do not value their own lives the way other species do. They see individual survival as less important than species survival. They will sacrifice themselves to give their people advantages in future battles. A old commander looked each cadet in the eye. We had been fighting soldiers who thought. Like scientists, every death was an experiment. Every battle was research. They were not just trying to win the war. They were trying to understand how to win the next one. Commander Zethkar dimmed the lights in the Academy Hall. The star charts on the wall began to glow, showing the vast emptiness of space where the worst battles had been fought. His scarred hands trembled as he activated the 3-dimensional display. The ground wars were terrible, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. But space combat against humans was pure nightmare. They fought in ways that violated every rule of civilized warfare. The display showed the scattered remnants of what had once been a massive battle fleet. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, and the cold vacuum of space. Admiral Carol Watson commanded the human space forces. She was a cargo ship pilot before the war, but she understood 3-dimensional combat better than our best military strategists. She thought like space itself. Zethkar manipulated the display to show fleet movements across several star systems. Our ships moved in formation, like naval vessels on an ocean surface. Neat rows, coordinated attacks, predictable patterns. The humans moved like predators in a 3-dimensional hunting ground. The cadets watched as the display showed human ships moving in impossible patterns, using gravity wells and asteroid fields as tactical advantages. Watson's ships would hide in the debris rings around gas giants for months. Her crews would go into hibernation to reduce their life support signatures. They would drift like dead metal until we came close enough to strike. The commander highlighted a specific engagement near the asteroid belt. The USS Relentless, under Captain Greg Morris, spent 6 months playing dead. They had shut down everything except minimal life support. No engines, no weapons, no communications. They looked like another piece of space junk. The display showed the human ship drifting among thousands of asteroids. When our salvage fleet arrived to collect what they thought were ship parts, Morris and his crew woke up. They had positioned themselves perfectly. One activation of their engines turned them into a kinetic missile traveling at impossible speed. Zethkar's voice grew harder. The Relentless destroyed 3 of our ships before we even knew it was alive. Morris had turned his entire vessel into a weapon. But that was not the worst part. The display zoomed in on the aftermath of the collision. The worst part was what happened next. The human crew had survived the impact by using their own cargo hold as a crash chamber. They had packed themselves into shipping containers filled with shock-absorbing gel. Several cadets looked sick at the thought. Morris and 43 crew members lived through a collision that should have killed everyone. They used emergency suits to move through the wreckage of our ships, collecting equipment and taking prisoners. The commander showed the rescue operation that followed. When our reinforcements arrived, they found Morris and his people had been living in the wreckage for 3 days. They had learned to use our life support systems. They had figured out our emergency protocols. They had turned the debris field into a temporary base. He switched to a different battle scenario. But the most terrifying human tactic was their boarding operations. Lieutenant Commander Nancy Price led the boarding specialists. She was a construction worker before the war, but she understood zero-gravity combat like she was born in space. The display showed human soldiers moving through the vacuum between ships. Price's teams would approach our vessels using nothing but magnetic boots and jury-rigged airlocks. They moved through space like they were walking on solid ground. They used our own hull plating as shields and handholds. Zethkar's mechanical leg clicked as he shifted his weight. The humans had learned to fight in 3 dimensions, while we were still thinking in 2. They would attack from above, below, and angles we never expected. They used zero gravity as a weapon. The display showed a detailed breakdown of a boarding action. Once inside our ships, the humans fought hand-to-hand in corridors and engineering. Spaces. They used our own atmosphere against us. They would breach life support systems and turn our air into poison gas. The commander highlighted specific sections of a ship's layout. Staff Sergeant Tony Mitchell held an entire deck of the dreadnought Corval's Might for 3 days after his squad was killed. He used alien corpses as improvised weapons and shields. He turned dead Zephyrians into a defensive barrier. The cadets stared at the tactical display in horror. Mitchell had barricaded himself in the engineering section with nothing but a damaged rifle and whatever materials he could find. He used our own maintenance tools as weapons. He rigged our own systems to electrocute anyone who tried to reach him. Zethkar walked around the display, his voice growing more disturbing. The humans had no respect for the dead. They would use corpses as decoys, as shields, as weapons. They turned death itself into a tactical advantage. The display showed communication intercepts from the battle. Mitchell's final transmission was the most chilling thing I ever heard. He was not angry or afraid. He was giving a detailed report about our ship's weaknesses to other human units. He was using his last moments to help his people kill us more efficiently. The commander switched to a broader view of the war. The humans had developed a new type of warfare in space. They did not try to control territory or capture resources. They tried to make space combat too expensive for us to continue. The display showed casualty ratios from multiple engagements. Every human ship we destroyed cost us 3 or 4 of our own vessels. Every human soldier we killed took 5 or 6 of our people with them. The mathematics of attrition were working against. Zethkar highlighted the final phase of the space war. Admiral Watson's greatest victory came at the Battle of Wolf, 359. She had gathered every available human ship for what appeared to be a final desperate attack on our main fleet. The display showed hundreds of human vessels approaching a massive Zephyrian battle group. Fleet Admiral Korath commanded 800 ships. The humans had maybe 200. It should have been a massacre. Instead, it became our worst defeat. The commander's voice grew quiet with remembered fear. Watson had not come to fight a traditional battle. She had come to conduct the largest military experiment in galactic history. Every human ship was equipped with different weapons, different tactics, different strategies. The display showed the battle's progression in horrifying detail. The humans tested every possible approach to space combat simultaneously. Some ships rammed us at high speed. Others used boarding actions. Some tried long-range bombardment. Others used stealth approaches. Zethkar manipulated the display to show casualty reports. Watson was not trying to win the battle. She was trying to collect data about which tactics worked best against our ships. She turned the entire engagement into a research project. The commander faced the cadets directly. The humans lost 160 ships at Wolf, 359, but they learned everything they needed to know about defeating us in space. Every surviving human pilot became an expert in killing Zephyrians. He showed the aftermath of the battle. Watson's final report was transmitted to every human military unit in the galaxy. Detailed analysis of our weaknesses. Specific recommendations for future engagements. Instructions for building better weapons. The display went dark. The humans had turned their own defeat into a victory. They had paid for knowledge with blood, and they considered it a fair trade. Zethkar's mechanical leg clicked as he moved to the front of the room. Space combat taught us that humans do not fight to win individual battles. They fight to understand the nature of warfare itself. Every engagement was a lesson they would never forget. The old commander looked each cadet in the eye. We had been fighting soldiers who thought like scientists and scientists who fought like soldiers. They were not trying to defeat us. They were trying to learn how to make us defeat ourselves. Commander Zethkar stood before the holographic display one final time. The image showed Earth hanging in space like a blue marble, beautiful and peaceful. But now the cadets knew better. They understood what lived on that small planet. The war ended at Earth itself, Zethkar began, his voice carrying the weight of terrible memories. High Command had decided that humans were too dangerous to leave alive. The orders were simple. Complete extermination of the species. The display zoomed in on the human homeworld, showing massive orbital defense platforms and thousands of ships in defensive positions. Grand Admiral Vorthik commanded the largest battle fleet in Zephyrian history. 2 million soldiers, 5,000 ships. Every weapon we had ever built. We came to Earth to finish what we had started. The old commander manipulated the display to show the approaching alien armada. We expected the humans to fight desperately. We expected them to use every trick they had learned during the war. We expected death and destruction on an unimaginable scale. He paused, remembering that moment when everything changed. Instead, we received a transmission from President Helen Carter. She was sitting in a simple office, alone, looking directly at our cameras. No anger, no fear, no desperate pleas for mercy. The display showed the human leader, calm and composed despite facing the annihilation of her entire species. Carter did not threaten us. She did not beg for peace. She simply told U.S. facts, scientific data about what would happen if we attacked Earth. Zethkar's voice grew quieter, more disturbing. She explained that every human ship in their fleet was equipped with antimatter charges, not just their military vessels. Every cargo ship, every civilian transport, every small personal craft. Millions of flying bombs waiting to detonate. The cadets stared at the display in growing horror. But that was not the worst part. Carter told us that every human soldier carried enough explosives to destroy a city block. Every human civilian had been trained in guerrilla warfare. Every human child knew how to make weapons from household materials. The commander showed detailed statistics scrolling across the screen. Carter was not making threats. She was presenting the mathematical reality of invading Earth. To kill every human, we would need to land on every continent, search every building, fight through every street. He highlighted population centers across the human homeworld. The humans had calculated the exact cost of their own extinction. 14 billion people, 7 continents, thousands of cities, millions of buildings. They had turned their entire planet into a fortress. Zethkar walked around the display, his mechanical leg clicking steadily. General Marcus Stone, the human military commander, provided additional details. The humans had been studying our biology. Since the war began, they had developed diseases specifically designed to kill Zephyrians. The display showed research facilities hidden across Earth's surface. Stone explained that biological weapons had already been deployed on our occupied worlds. Bacteria that ate through our equipment. Viruses that attacked our nervous systems. Chemical compounds that made our food supplies toxic. Several cadets looked sick at the implications. The humans had not just been fighting us. They had been preparing to commit genocide against our entire species. They had turned their defeat into a weapon of mass destruction. The commander showed intercepts of human communications from across the galaxy. Every human settlement, every space station, every hidden base had received the same orders. If Earth fell, they were to begin systematic extermination of all Zephyrian life. No negotiations, no prisoners, complete species warfare. Zethkar's voice grew harder. Carter made the choice clear. We could withdraw, and both species would survive. Or we could attack, and both species would die. The humans had already decided they would rather destroy everything than surrender. The display showed the massive human defense fleet surrounding Earth. But the most terrifying moment came when Stone revealed their final preparation. The humans had built weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Not just planets, entire solar systems. The cadets sat in stunned silence. Stone showed us the specifications. Stellar engineering projects that could make stars go supernova. Gravity weapons that could collapse solar systems into black holes. The humans had learned to kill on a cosmic scale. The commander manipulated the display to show the technical data. They had not built these weapons to win the war. They had built them to ensure that if humanity died, we would die with them. They had made mutual extinction the only possible outcome of total war. Zethkar turned off the display and faced the cadets directly. Grand Admiral Vorthik spent 3 days studying the human data. His science teams confirmed that everything Carter and Stone had said was true. The humans had the ability to destroy both species completely. The old commander's voice carried the weight of defeat. The withdrawal order came on the 4th day. The largest battle fleet in our history turned around and left Earth untouched. We had been defeated not by superior weapons or tactics, but by superior mathematics. He walked to the front of the room. The humans had calculated the exact cost of their own extinction and made sure we could not afford to pay it. They had turned death itself into a strategic weapon. Zethkar looked each cadet in the eye. The peace treaty was signed 6 months later, not because either side had won, but because the humans had made winning impossible. They had changed the nature of warfare itself. The commander moved to the window, looking out at the stars. Carter's final message to our fleet has been studied by military strategists for 15 years. She did not celebrate victory or demand tribute. She simply said that both species had learned something important about the universe. He turned back to face the cadets. She said that in a galaxy full of intelligent life, the species that survives is not the strongest or the smartest. It is the one that refuses to accept extinction, the one that will pay any price to continue existing. Zethkar's mechanical leg clicked as he returned to the center of the room. The humans had shown us that they were not just another species, competing for resources. They were evolution itself, refined into its purest form. The will to survive given intelligence and weapons. The silence in the Academy Hall was complete. General Stone's final report contained one sentence that still haunts our military leadership. He wrote that humans had been preparing for total war since they first looked up at the stars. They had always known that someday they would meet something that wanted to destroy them. The old commander's voice grew quiet. Stone said that humans had spent their entire history getting ready for us. Every war they fought among themselves was practice for the day they would have to fight for their species. Every weapon they built was a prototype for killing aliens. Zethkar faced the young officers one last time. The war taught us that we had not been fighting soldiers or scientists or strategists. We had been fighting the concept of survival itself. We had gone to war against a species that had turned existence into a weapon. He moved toward the exit, his mechanical leg clicking with each step. You asked me to tell you about the human. War, now you know. We thought we were the predators, and they were the prey. We learned that in the universe, there is only one true predator, the species that refuses to die. The commander stopped at the door and looked back at the silent cadets. Remember this lesson. Humans are not our enemies anymore, but they are still out there among the stars, getting stronger and smarter and more dangerous every day. They are still practicing for the next war. His final words echoed through the academy hall as he left. And someday, they will meet something, even more determined to survive than they are. When that day comes, I hope we are not caught in the middle.